Hello, Chris Liepe here with, wow, two amazing YouTubers, great friends, and now collaborators. How are you doing, guys? Chris Liepe here.
Super well. It's an exciting big day.
Two amazing YouTubers. We got stuff going on. Oh, one of you might have an audio loop back there if you're watching the feed.
Yep.
Okay.
Did you turn on your Echoplex?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. I've got it. There's a real tape, you know, so it sounds really nice.
So here we are. This is amazing. Please welcome Marc Martel and Warren Hewitt. We got a chance to go out. Well, gosh, when was it? August. We met Marc in Nashville at Blackbird Studios, and it was awesome. We did like a whole day of mic shootouts, and then we started working on this course.
Yeah, that was mic shootouts. In fact, Marc and I did that with you, Chris, and then we carried on.
Right.
We came here and tried the 47, which really worked, and I think the chain as well. And then Marc ended up getting a Townsend. Shout out to Townsend because they were very, very generous with us. And and all that stuff is actually kind of covered in the course. There's a lot of stuff talking about, you know, the right mic, and then the Townsend's now Marc's mic of choice. Yeah.
So dare I ask, is the microphone shootout in the course?
Oh, there's tiny pieces of it, but we didn't know. I mean, it's not the focus of the course.
It doesn't seem like that would be what our course is about. It's about
no, but
about microphones.
We did have a question come in that is very relevant to this course. I'm gonna scroll back up here. Question for Marc, and I'll answer some of this too. But could you please tell me what exercises you do to develop vocal distortion and grit, and what types of vocal distortion do you use, and how do you develop control over it for your entire range? And before Marc answers,
please
protect the innocent. This is a huge topic in the course. We have multiple lessons that go into this, but if you know Marc singing, you know that he came about things by experimenting and introspection. So, I mean, you don't do exercises for grit. You figure out how to sing lines, figure out how they feel, and make it work that way. So your lines are your exercises.
Yeah. I mean, I did a lot of trial, and I'm not going to go into the technical stuff because I mean that's a whole course section in itself. But I did a lot of trial and error. Honestly, I started by listening to some of my favorite singers that sounded like me, trying to imitate them. I hurt myself a little bit, which not advisable, but that's how I got to where I am today, just by listening to other singers and trying to reproduce that sound. And that's essentially it. And now I have a more thought out process on how to exactly achieve that. And we cover it in depth in the course.
And what that looks like is we've cherry-picked certain lines, certain Queen song lines, certain lines from your original material, and we've honed in on areas where you're getting this amazing tone. Some of it's distortion, some of it's, you know, cool, rangy sorts of things. And then we reverse engineer those into a common, approachable technique. And that's what's so cool about these things, is they're reverse engineered from real music. No, like, do this scale and then this scale and then pull out this straw and jam it in your ear. And there's none of that.
No ear jamming.
Yes, anybody that's ever watched my channel knows it's one of my pet peeves when people make it all about the technical. And in this instance, that would be like obsessing over like modes and scales and stuff like that. Because musicians, and I've been blessed to work with incredible artists like Marc, of course, who we just did a Christmas EP with, and you know, Steven Tyler and some incredible rock singers. And the thing about all of them is they're not going up to the microphone going, you know, I really need to like glissando on the E flat, and if I go to the Lydian, Phrygian, Demonish, you know, it's just not how people think. And it's a big deal for me that you guys were able to like make it about performance, and because that unlocks creativity in such a remarkable way, you know, because all great music is improvised. It doesn't matter if you're Mozart or Beethoven. You sit down and you go
experimental.
Yeah, you don't go, oh, I need to stay within the Lydian mode. You know, that's just not, with the exception of like Kind of Blue by Miles Davis or something where they limited themselves specifically. Music is not thought of in those ways. So I thought that you guys did an amazing job together of making it accessible to people. So they're like, oh, I can do this, as opposed to like thinking you need a degree or a professorship in music to even think about it.
Sure.
Yeah, it's super practical. It's everything's in layman's terms. We're not getting super heady about stuff. It's just the way I do things, the way that I've, like I said, you know, learned it from trial and error. And a big part of it for me is doing stuff that I can do in the studio, but also make it translate live. And when I'm translating it live, how not to injure myself and how to keep going day after day, especially when like I'm on a big tour, which I was supposed to be on currently, but is not happening. But right now, I was supposed to be on a tour that was 30 dates across 6 weeks. Wow. And, you know, I've got to figure out how to keep my vocal health up while still giving a believable, strong performance night after night. So, and we also talk about that.
Yeah, yeah. So 2 questions. What do each of you look for in the right mic? Like, what are and Mark, what are you listening for when you go, oh, that's the mic? And then Warren, what do you listen for? And I really, before you guys answer, I thought it was really fascinating when we were in Nashville. We had all these, I mean, just a ridiculous, you'll see in the course, we have like, I don't know, 15 mics or something jammed in Mark's face, you know.
Heaven.
What?
Heaven.
Oh, yeah. And I'm out in the control room and we're listening to these different mics, and Warren's like, yeah, I don't like to put anything on them when I'm listening. Nothing, like no reverb, no EQ. I just like to hear the mic. We'll mess with that stuff later, but I don't want anything to color my decision. I just want to listen to the mic. And that was weird for me because I'm always listening to things in context, but it makes sense to me now. And since then, I've really tried to be a little bit more purist when listening to gear, because if you stack a bunch of your normal stuff on top of it, you don't really know what's doing what. So that was really neat. But anyway, there's the question. Mark, and then Warren.
In a good mic, I've noticed, I've just learned about my own voice in a more technical EQ curve sense over the last few years of doing my own music and having different mixing engineers mix my music and in particular mix my voice. And a couple of guys have told me that, man, you've got like a really big peak right around 2.5K. And so when I look at a mic, I'm looking for something that has a built-in kind of bit of a dip or a scoop right around that area. And there's a couple mics that I find really just do that without a whole lot of EQ. Now, I've used this microphone a lot just because it's a really strong, it's a classic rock and roll mic, and I do a lot of rock and roll. But I find that with this microphone, I can get it there. I just have to treat a lot of EQ to it. But I recently discovered that the Akg C12a, not the C12 that everybody uses today, but the lesser known C12a, which is a microphone that Freddie Mercury used a lot. And I discovered recently, I got to try one during our microphone shootout. First time I've ever sung into one, because you can't buy them anymore. They're just vintage. And it, to my ear, has a nice smooth top, upper mid-range in that 2 to 3K area. It doesn't poke out because I've got a really annoying frequency right up there. And any mic that reduces that is, it's a better starting point for me. And it helps that it's got a bit of a more punchy low end to accentuate frequencies that aren't necessarily naturally present in my voice. And I like something that has a sparkly top end because I love to get up on the mic and get really breathy. So the C12A, also Telefunken 251 has wowed me. And so that mic you see right back there, as Warren mentioned, that's the Townsend Labs Sphere 2022 Sphere. Is that what it's called? Townsend Labs.
I think it's called like a L22 or something.
L22, L22 Sphere.
Yeah.
That is my current microphone, but it's a microphone modeler, and what it does, it actually has software that models the 2 microphones that I mentioned, and many, many, many more. And so this is the microphone I'm using these days because I love it.
What's really cool is in the course, Marc breaks down his entire signal chain, and we get to see stuff and hear stuff that was recorded on that model with some of the other effects and signal chain sorts of things that he does. So you really get to hear and see it dialed in Pro Tools, which is really neat, because that mic is, if you haven't used it, it's kind of mystifying, because it comes in on stereo tracks, and you have to put 2 inputs in, and then you have this software that allows you to model, but that comes after the preamp somehow. Like it's weird, but it just sounds amazing.
It really does.
All right, Warren, what do you listen for in a good mic? And particularly, what do you listen for in Marc's voice? And so we can line that up.
Lots of good questions. What's interesting about it is with Marc's voice, like he's saying, there's a little bit, and this is what's interesting. And the reason why I want to point this out is a little bit of aggressiveness in that 2 to 3K range. It actually isn't as bad as maybe he's expressing.
Sure.
But what it is, but what it is Marc is quite unusual. I mean, there's not many singers of Marc's level. I'm not just doing this to blow smoke and stuff like that. But, Marc is right up there with the guys we're talking about, the Isaacs and the Stevens and all this kind of stuff. He's a truly gifted rock singer. And I'm not just saying that, to flatter him, but the reality is with most of those guys, when you're working with a Tyler or Isaac and Marc, what I notice is that subtle differences are huge things for them. Like huge things. And let's think about it. We were at Blackbird. We went through, I don't know, I'm going to guess 20 mics. And we're not just going through 20 mics. We're going through U47s, the one that George Massenburg considers to be the most pristine, perfect U47 in the world.
We're not talking about some mics.
Some ratty collection of barely working microphones. We're talking like pristine, John, like really, and Marc is like, I like that, but. And then we would go in and we would listen in solo, and we would also listen in the track, which is important to hear characteristics in solo, but also to hear, like you were talking about, Chris, how does it actually sound in the track? Because that's actually but it's just as important in many ways. And we did it all blind, and we kept coming back to these same 2 or 3 microphones blind. And I think that from a perspective of the producer engineers thing, I liked 2 or 3 microphones that also corresponded to what Marc liked, but Marc was very, very specific about details that might not have bothered me, that I would have been like, I can fix that little tiny extra thing there.
Yeah.
So the message and the lesson of what I just said is listen to your singer. As a producer and an engineer, it doesn't matter if you think that your microphone that you bought is the best ever vocal mic. You're not, if they want to get in there and put an SM58 up and sing into it, you're better off having a happy singer with a great headphone mix than you are going, but my $15,000 vintage.
Right. Yeah. I recently. Go ahead, Marc.
It really comes down to what inspires you as a singer. I mean, like we ran into a lot of those situations where it was microphones that to my ears was kind of like, it's okay. And Warren was like, oh, that sounds amazing. It's got everything I want to hear, and I can make it sound like, give it the little extra thing that you want to hear in the mix with EQ and compression. I'm like, but it doesn't inspire me in the vocal booth. So that's really what it comes down to me, because that's where you get the performances in the vocal booth. And if you got to get it as close to how you want to hear it while you're recording, obviously. So that's what it comes down to me, unless you can just be so analytical and pragmatic about your singing, which not a lot of artists are, I don't think, and just say, it's okay while I'm recording and I can fix it later. I mean, that's, if you can do that, more power to you.
Yeah, we also had an ulterior motive. Is like we wanted to find a mic for Marc that will be his mic.
Which I think it's cool that you did all this, and then you did the modeling mic. Because but you found the modeling mic and what worked there by going through the real mic.
Yes, absolutely.
Like that was really neat.
Well, one of the issues, realities, I should say, one of the realities of vintage microphones is that, I mean, I have 2 C12As. Blackbird had 5 or 6, and every single one of them sounds different.
And that's why I don't buy vintage gear.
That's why he doesn't buy vintage gear. And he asked me point blank, should I spend the $6,000 to $10,000 on a C12A? One just came up, and I said, just go with the Townsend because and to be honest, he's made it his own. It now sounds like even more unique, and I think that's the thing as well. I think, you know, we all want to like put our stake in the ground and, you know, and fly our flag. It needs to be something that inspires you, as Marc is saying. And I think just to wrap up from my end, really, from a producer engineer's perspective, that's the thing we have to remember, is that if the artist isn't happy, it doesn't matter how it sounds to us.
Right.
And nobody has ever bought a record going, oh, you know, I really love the 7K sparkle on the vocal. That's not what sells records. But they will buy a record, no matter how badly recorded, and they go, oh my God, I can really identify with the singer, the emotion.
Yes, and that right there, the emotion. Yeah. This is the perfect segue into the next question.
Great.
John asks, what's your view of people who are born with talent, singers, who versus those who have learned? Ultimately, is there a difference? And before you guys go, I want to add my 2 cents here.
I should go last on this one. I've got a very strong opinion on this.
Yeah. So having worked with guys like Marc, who are obviously naturally talented, but work really, really hard at the same time, and having worked with thousands and thousands of students, I can say definitively that most of the time when you think you're listening to someone who is all talent and comparing it to you, who you are saying has no talent, you are looking at the situation incorrectly. What you are perceiving as talent, there might be talent, but what you're perceiving is a strong emotional connection. And the emotional connection is present. We'll use Marc as an example. He has, over time, been able to intuitively connect the way he feels to the way he sounds. And when you have the ability to do that in 2 ways, connect the way you feel, the sensations that you feel, and translate those to sounds that are desirable, but also the way you feel from an emotional and even spiritual perspective. When you can connect those, the way you feel there from emotions to the way you feel physically to the way that you express with sound. When you can connect those 3 things, you will be perceived as talented. Not by hitting great notes, not by having a huge range, not by working on your distortion. These are all fun things to do, but if they're not done in an emotionally connected, introspective, and intuitive way, in this order, you will be a clinically great, boring, horrible singer who is, quote, not talented. Mm-hmm. And so this whole thing about, well, you either have it or you don't, or, you know, that guy's, you know, is really an amazing singer and I could never do that. That's like the stupidest thing in the world to say.
See, I didn't have to go last. I mean, Chris is basically just saying exactly what I agree with entirely. Yeah. I cannot agree more. Some of my quote, and I'll make this quick because Chris has said exactly. I agree, ditto. Some of my favorite singers, Freddie Mercury's my favorite singer. Anybody who's ever watched my channel knows that. But that's my favorite band and my favorite singer. However, I just did a video on Depeche Mode. I love Depeche Mode. I love that guy's voice. I love Gary Newman's voice. I love it. To me, that's, you know, I love Aretha Franklin. I love people with amazing ranges, but what all of the singers I love is the expressiveness. And even if, you know, it's Bob Marley singing Redemption Song, you know, oh, pirates. that gets me. That makes every hair stand on my body. And it's not about, you know, a 3-octave range or a 5-octave range.
No. But the irony of it is, and then I'll let Marc answer. The irony of it is by being, and there's so many life parallels to this, by being satisfied with where you're at, quote unquote, musically, and really pursuing the emotional connection and the sensation-based approach. How do things feel when I'm doing these certain sounds? You, in a very backdoor, indirect way, achieve the things that you wanted to achieve anyway. And this, you achieve a better range. You are able to sing with distortion because it's emotionally charged distortion. Yes, techniques are wonderful. And part of what makes the course that we've done so magical is that we take what Marc has discovered via these emotional, physical, introspective connections, and we distill them into ways that, okay, start here. Try this with your face. Try this with your larynx. Try this with your false chord area. Try all these things. And then sing your heart out. See what happens. Feel it out. Be willing to be a little bit dangerous. Do it in short increments. But the thing that we need to remember as vocalists and students and aspiring vocalists is that there is no they who are talented and us who are not. We're all the same. We just have to learn how to think differently. Singing's in the mind. Marc?
Yeah, I basically want to reword or just echo what you guys have already said. There's nothing in there that I would even disagree with, and I'm glad I didn't go first because I would have given a much lesser answer to that. But it's there's a bit of a myth, I think, when it comes to talent and ability. I mean, talent is a real thing. Some people are just born with a natural giftedness to do things a little less work than others, maybe. I think everybody can get there, but when you're singing, you have to realize the main goal is to communicate emotion, communicate emotions that you are identifying with. And you can hear the most well-trained opera singer belt out every note perfectly, but it just doesn't reach you. And then you hear someone who's maybe a little less fantastic singing the same song and reaching you on a much more emotional level because they're connecting with the music. And that's really the most important thing. Not, how well you warmed up or how much grit you can add on certain notes. It really is about, and there's so many examples about rock singers who that guy's not a great singer, but man, can he connect with his emotions. And that's really all you care about. And that's a lesson that has taken me many years to learn. And I'm still learning it. I'm still learning how to connect with the emotion in my music, and I'm still learning how to connect with my emotions just as a human being.
Yeah.
And the singing is just a natural outpouring of that. And I think people need to realize, if you want to be a singer, that is the most important thing that you need to do, is to be an integrated human being, is to know how you're feeling, why you're feeling certain emotions. Maybe take some therapy. I don't know. Maybe that's the first step. So that's where I would go with that.
So
wonderfully put. Couple of things. Steve Magora is here, and he said he agrees with everything. And Steve is a good friend of ours. Steve is in Toto. He's the background singer and actually sings lead.
Awesome.
In Toto as well.
Hi, Steve.
On a couple of songs, and is I agree 100%. And Steve is like Marc, is a very gifted singer. And I think gifted is, look, I know Marc's work ethic. We've worked with Marc, and I had him come down here and we sung vocals that I did not have to use any tuning on whatsoever.
So awesome.
And got some incredible vocals. And he even still went home and wanted to re-sing some stuff just because of his level of perfection that he wants. But then if you go and watch Don't Stop Me Now, forgive me if I'm wrong, Marc, but isn't that one take?
Yeah, 100%. That's Don't Stop Me Now is one take, no tuning whatsoever. Because I didn't touch
with
that.
About 2 million views on Facebook.
Yeah, that's
so
and
awesome. Now, not to say that I never tune my voice. I do use Melodyne often, but when it's fine, it's fine. And I also need to learn how to just be okay with something that's not absolutely perfect.
Well, it's the emotional thing, right? It might be slightly off pitch, but the the approach, the way it was sung, the timing, all that stuff works. So who cares?
It's funny how auto-tune and that whole software world has trained us as music consumers in sort of a bad way, honestly. Yesterday, my wife and I were watching something on TV, and the song "At Last" by Ella Fitzgerald.
One of many people who did it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And I was listening to that song, and there was a couple of notes in there that were a little flat, and I was like, "Oh no, I can't enjoy this song in its completeness because I'm trained to hear only perfect singers all the time." And I don't know how we untrain ourselves with that whole thing, but that's a whole different subject.
It's probably the Etta James version,
Etta James.
Yeah. But everybody's covered it. It's an absolute masterpiece. So that I agree with that. There's whole YouTube channels sort of dedicated towards these kinds of discussions in autotune now. It's a very hotbed discussion, and hilariously enough, we actually just put our video out today, and it's on autotune.
Awesome.
There you go.
A couple more questions here that are just awesome. Where I lost it. Someone said after we were talking about the emotion stuff, this is all easy unless you're tone deaf. And then someone else mentioned here, when you mentioned working some of these sensations that we talked about into short increments, why do you do that? And we use short increments for the reason that Marc touched on at the very beginning of this, where when he was feeling things out, he would not mess his voice up, but there would be some discomfort when he was starting to feel sensations out in the beginning. And if you try to just, I'm going to work on distortion today, but I better get my 3 hours of vocal practicing in. If you do that, then you are going to work against yourself really quickly, because once you start tiring out, I mean, it's just like working out, right? Like, I'm going to go on a 10-mile run because I'm supposed to go on a 10-mile run. I don't care what my body says. I'm just going to go on a 10. You're not going to learn anything about your body. You're not going to get in better shape. You're going to injure yourself. And so when we start out in very short increments, we are giving ourselves little bits of that sensation so that we can learn to lengthen it and approach it from a healthy, fresh way every time. And then gradually we train our muscle memory, and then we can go longer. And then with the unless you're tone deaf, which every single time I talk about, or I have people on and we talk about the whole, essentially what we're talking about here is anybody can learn to sing. And then someone says, well, what if you're tone deaf? Well, and I say Rage Against the Machine. I say Zach De La Rocha, and I say that guy is one of the greatest vocalists and one of the most entertaining vocalists. But you know what he did? He found a way to connect emotionally and physically to his voice. So it's what screws us up, especially the what if I'm tone deaf people, is they look at a singer like Marc and they go, I could never do that. I just don't have that good a pitch naturally. And it's true. Some people have this natural ability to hear pitch and some people don't. But
Chris, I didn't when I was a kid. I was obsessed with music, but I didn't start playing music until I was 15. I got my first guitar at 15 because my father and I built it. I wanted to be Brian May in all ways, shape or form, including building the guitar. And also out of necessity, frankly, we couldn't afford to buy a guitar. But my dad was a craftsman, so an artist, so we were able to build one. And I couldn't tune the bleeding thing. I could not. When I was a kid, you had pitchforks. The Boss tuners were out, but honestly, I didn't have the money to buy what would have probably been £70 in a day, when £70 is more than most people made in a day. We're talking 30 plus years ago. Yeah. So I'm 15 years old and I'm trying to tune it with a pitchfork. I hear bing and I'm trying to get the A in tune. I'm just going everywhere, snapping strings. I had no real pitch. You
had to train it. You had to train it into you.
I had to train it. Yeah. And so that always sort of a little bit irks me. You can tell when people use that. I think that there's two excuses that we all do as human beings, and I'm just as guilty of it, is I can't do it because he or she was born with the talent.
Yes.
And that's number one. And then the second one is just kind of to reduce everything to
skill.
skill to my hands, this, that, and the other.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
all kinds of physical attributes of why you're not able to do something. I think for me, all I know is hard work, and I tend to take longer to get to the place. But the difference is I don't give up.
So along, and Mark can speak to this very well. Around, like right after we got back from Nashville, I did a video called "How to Sing Higher as a Baritone," and I posed that question because that's a question that I get a lot. Because there's this aura around people who are baritones and basses that, well, I can't sing as high as ... because I'm a baritone. And it's this mentally limiting thing. And I got a lot of great interaction on the video, and I had examples in that video of people who are baritones that can sing extremely high, higher than some tenors, and basically made the case that you can't use "I'm a baritone so I can't sing high" as an excuse. You have to lean in to certain techniques and certain approaches, and then you'll be able to sing all over your range. And then I had people coming in the chat saying, "Wasn't Freddie Mercury a baritone?" And I was like, huh. Well, ultimately, it doesn't even matter. The voice classification doesn't matter. People use voice classification as an excuse to not do something. It speaks kind of to what you were saying, Warren. But how have you, Mark, I remember there was a distinct point in the course where you said something, when we were talking about range, you said something to the effect of, I don't really pay attention to how I can sing. It's really about how I connect with the notes. That's what you said, like, right away in the course.
Yeah, there's a weird reverence out there about how high someone can sing, and maybe that comes down to intelligibility, because the higher you speak is probably the distance of being able to hear someone what they're saying tends to travel and hit our ears more easily, and someone has a lower voice, you have to kind of lean in more. I don't know where that comes from.
Yeah.
But we humans have a natural reverence, and we find it more spectacular when someone can sing high for some reason, and I feel like that too for some reason. I don't know why, and I have always loved higher singers, and we know that singers with higher tenor voices, especially before there was good amplification, tend to maybe have more success because people could hear what they were saying better.
Yeah.
And like even back in the 70s or 60s, before they had the technology of personal monitors figured out right, guys who could really belt and sing and be heard over this loud band behind them tend to have a little more success, I think, especially in the world of rock and roll. But I don't know why it matters. I mean, I tend to have, I happen to have a higher voice, and it's actually my range is getting better as I get older because I'm working at it. Just 2 nights ago, I was at a friend's birthday party, and there was an old friend of mine there, and he hadn't seen me sing live for quite some time, many years, and he was like, "How is your range even higher than it used to be? That's crazy." As the male voice ages, you kind of usually lose your range. But I think you can rage against that the more you work in. And I think really being on the road has kept my range up there. I think if I wasn't a touring musician, if I was just a studio musician, I don't think I would have the benefits of keeping my range higher. But I don't know. What was the original question? I don't even know if I'm addressing the original question, but that's
absolutely.
Well, there's a lot of people. There's a lot of people talking about age, I think, and I think you're actually answering that question. That what if I'm too old? That's come up a lot here. So I think you're covering that.
Yeah, it comes down to your health. I'm very health conscious. I pay attention to any sort of discomfort or pain in my body. And at any time something feels out of whack, I'm just like, okay, what is that? We got to deal with that so that we don't keep making that worse. And especially when it comes to my voice. And I've injured my voice many times where I've had a string of shows in a row, especially if I'm sick and I have a bunch of shows in a row and I need, what's really scary is when I need like more than 2 3 days to recover. I'm like, oh boy, okay, I got to figure out how not to do that again. But I think I'm a natural tenor. And when it comes to Freddie Mercury, I don't know. It's a good question because, you know, when you listen to the song, I'm Going Slightly Mad, that I have trouble getting down that low.
Yeah.
And the older I get, the easier it is for me to get down in the range of that song. So my range is actually going in both directions the older I get, because it's naturally the older voice, the vocal cords do something naturally that allows they stretch or whatever over time, but you can also go up in that direction as well. And I'm proof of that just from singing constantly and figuring out how, and we actually cover in the course the method that I've just recently learned how to sing up high without straining. So that's a really important thing in the course that I'm excited for you guys to see.
Another thing that's really fun in light of what you just said about the course is that we do a retrospective or kind of an anthology of what Marc's singing career. And you were just mentioning that you can go lower now and higher now. And when we listen to some of that early Down Here stuff, and you even said it like, oh, I hear some of that Eddie Vedder in my voice, that where you almost had this chip on your shoulder that you were trying to prove that you could be this manly vocalist.
Yep.
And it ended up sounding, I think it sounds fine, but in your words, maybe a little bit contrived or forced. Yes. But now, when we were experimenting over those old lines, the tone and richness that you have in your lower range over those lines that you wrote 20-some years ago, it's almost like, man, we should go back and re-record some of those.
Yeah.
There's some really neat qualities in your voice now, especially lower, even though you can go higher. And we do have a lot of questions about age. I, even as primarily a studio musician, have discovered the same thing, Marc, that you were talking about. My range has gotten, octaves better as I've gotten older, which is weird, because that's not what people, and what it boils down to is going back to understanding how to feel things physically in your body and react to them. It's something similar to, I'm sitting in this chair, and if I'm going to make this chair, which is not that comfortable, work for the length of this session, I'm going to have to sit in certain ways. If I'm uncomfortable, I move a little bit. If my lower back starts hurting, I sit up a little bit. And if I start noticing these things, I can make a lot more use out of this chair. But if I am so focused on, talking with you guys or whatever, I may end up at the end of the session going, man, my lower back hurts. I have no idea why. Well, if I was paying attention to my body, I would. And it's this same sort of approach that makes good singers good over long periods of time, because they learn to listen to their body even when they're doing their craft, even when they're singing. Oh, that feels a little weird. Let me make it feel a little bit different. Oh, that doesn't sound so good.
I remember working with Tasha Taylor, who, I don't know if anybody remembers Johnny Taylor. He had a bunch of #1 hit singles, Disco Lady in the 70s. In the 60s, he had a song called the longest title of a #1 hit ever. It was called Who's Making Love to Your Old Lady When You're Not at Home. And anyway, an amazing R&B and funk and disco singer, just incredible. And she said that to me, this is like 15 years ago when we were working. She said her father and her always lived by the adage, listen to your body. And, those kind of R&B singers were, 200 shows a year, 300 shows a year, just like getting into vans and driving from one venue and then doing like those 3, like matinee performance, night performance, drive overnight, get up, sing, there was no, in the 60s, there was no monitor systems most of the time. So it'd show up at places where it was the band and maybe a half-ish kind of vocal PA and a hope for the get. And yeah, it's sort of a reality that if you're not listening to your body, then you will, yes, you'll destroy your voice. It's interesting because a lot of people talk about Stephen. Marc was talking about it. Yeah, he's been doing now for quite a few years 2 days off. So he'll do a show, 2 days off, sing a show. But the guy's in his mid 70s, maybe even late 70s now, and still doing it, consistently. I will say though, I want to point something out. Not all singers have the ability to increase their range as they get older because they are not working on their voice. They are not. They're not. And I think that's an important thing about what Marc talks about in this is actual exercises. Because yes, a lot of singers have damaged their voice. Poor old Roger Daltrey, one of my favorite singers, one of my favorite bands. They're doing everything in keys and he's singing well lower than he ever did before. But many singers, like Marc is an amazing example, have increased their range because they're looking after it. So maybe Marc, because a couple of people are asking, can you talk a little bit about your process of warm up and how you kind of, maintain your voice?
So one thing I had discovered and recently was that a warm up is time. It's time to make the sounds that you're not necessarily going to make on stage, but kind of explore all the nooks and crannies of your vocal cords. It's not just a quick, 15-minute doing scales or anything like that for me, especially on a tour, which is the epitome of a time where I need to warm up my voice. If I'm out doing a one-off, say I'm flying to some casino and it's one show in a weekend, honestly, I'm lucky if I warm up at all, and it's fine because I don't have to sing the next day.
Yeah.
But if it's always in situations where I have to sing the next day, where I'm just like, okay, I got to take this slow. I take a couple hours in the afternoon where I start with, we released this just recently, my vocal warm-up thing, right, Chris?
Yeah. We have a full warm-ups course that's free. That talks. I mean, Marc goes through his exact routine on tour and off tour. It's awesome.
Yeah, I've started with this lovely vocal coach in Germany in 2020 when I lost my voice. I got sick on the road and had to cancel shows for the first time in my life. She introduced me to this new thing called bubbling, and you basically blow air into a bottle with some water in it. And that's the very first step in my vocal warm-up that I do now when I need to be singing over many days. That's the first thing I do to engage my vocal cords, and then I'll wait an hour or two and then do this very specific vocal warm-up. And I'm not belting, I'm just doing very soft incremental things, doing some vocal fry, like that kind of thing. It's not rocket science. It's nothing new. If you've looked up any vocal training routines, it's a lot of whatever you're going to find out there. But I've found a routine that works for me, seems to work really well, and I can hit the ground running, as they say. The top of the show, I feel like I'm at 100% instead of what I typically have done in the past as using the first two songs of the set as my vocal warm-up, which is a terrible idea.
One thing that was really neat about discussing the warm-up thing with you in the course was that you expound on that journey of like, I'm just going to start and see what happens, versus like you said at the very beginning here, exploring the nooks and crannies, coming to terms with where your voice is at the beginning of your warm-up so that you can express and emote effectively. It's not about proving anything in the warm-up stage. It's about rediscovering over and over again. Yep. So that's really, it's encouraging to hear someone like you talk about that, because there is so much of this sense that like, oh, he's just good. But what we show in this course is that you're not, you are good, but you're not just good. You're good because of the 30 lessons that we've outlined why. and you can as well. Got a couple other questions. Certainly, Warren, if you're seeing some things that I'm missing, feel free to ask.
Well, I think Andy asked a good question. He's a Plap Academy member, and
nice.
He and his wife are artists, and they write and record, and his wife is the main singer. And he wanted to know if you've got any ideas about how to get her out of her comfort zone, because at the moment she's focused on a 1 or 2 keys as being like, these are the right keys for me, which obviously, when you're talking about 12 tones, if she can sing say 2 octaves with 12 tones, there's many keys within that. But any sort of thoughts on that, how we might shake the tree and make her think a little bit differently?
Yeah, for me, it's definitely not about keys. It's about knowing where my different emotional ranges are. And you can sing in those ranges in any key, honestly. Like for me, if I want to explore my power range, I know it's going to be somewhere between, F and a high C. And if I can find a song that has those emotional ranges right in that range of notes, like the this coffee's not working. So the climax of a song, for example, if you're hitting, for me, it would be, I like to hit at least an A, if not a B. And if the climax of that song is in that range, you set the key to where it hits that note. There's only certain keys I like to play piano in, or certain keys that are easier for guitarists to play without a capo. But as far as singers, you can literally sing in any key as long as you're hitting those emotional ranges in your voice. If you want to really drive a point home, then you want to figure out where those emotional notes are in your range. And if you're singing a softer song, don't put it up high so that you can get more tender with the lyrics. So that's really all I would say about that.
So Mary and Sam, another great Academy members, said, Mary says, I used to be a soprano when I was in a high school choir, but then my voice changed to an alto. Is it possible I could get back to singing in a higher range, or is that just a normal thing that happened to me?
Well, I have a kind of a fun anecdote to that. Back in the early 2000s, Chris Cornell, Soundgarden singer, was checked into rehab, and he had released his first solo album, and Soundgarden had disbanded for the first time. And when he got out, he was singing we went in Audioslave, and I got to see him on one of the first 2 concerts that Audioslave put on, and his voice was not the same as it was on his solo record and as it was on even the 1996 era Soundgarden. And I mean, we all heard it, but especially us vocalists heard it. And then the other thing that was really interesting, when Soundgarden reformed in 2010, after Chris had gone through and done a few solo albums, he had his range back, and he had his power back, and it was like he went. I mean, just this super bohemian, amazing, rangy vocalist, and then he went through this dip where he wasn't singing as much. He damaged some things with overuse and alcohol and stuff like that. And you could say, yeah, he got some vocal coaching. But when you watch interviews, he says definitively, yeah, I had to relearn how my voice worked. And he was singing up into the end of his life. He was singing G5s, and they sounded different. He sounded older, but he was still doing it, and it was still amazing. Absolutely, you can reclaim your former glory as a singer. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. I'll defer to you on that one. I'm not an expert on losing your range and regaining it. I mean, I just think back to, as a child, as a male in particular, you start as a boy singing alto to soprano, and then something happens to your body, and there's no way you're ever going to sound like that again, nor would you really want to. But yeah, that's always inspiring to hear stuff like that, because there's nothing scarier for a vocalist than losing your range, especially when it's because of damage.
Yeah.
But if it's because of just a natural thing in your body, I just kind of go with it and kind of get it out of your head that higher is better.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, expressive is better. You know, another vocalist that I refer to often, who is not the greatest vocalist and doesn't have the greatest range. I might get eggs thrown at me or something, but it's Tom Petty.
Sure, incredible.
He's an incredible vocalist, but not a. I mean, is he a good vocal? You know, it's like
no, he's like you know, he's basically a Bob Dylan with maybe
a vibe singer.
Yeah,
Bob Dylan, but with he's a technically a better singer than Bob Dylan.
Yes,
but Bob Dylan, of course, is one of the most expressive and one of the greatest songwriters that ever lived. And
as far as Bob Dylan would lead us to believe, he might be the amazing singer that nobody knows, but he just wants us to believe he's this other guy,
right?
Yeah. I mean, Bob Dylan wrote "It Ain't Me, Babe" and "Just Like a Woman," two of my favorite songs. And to me, it's like that always wins. I mean, in the discussion we're having here, and it's interesting because I want. And by the way, if people see me looking away, it's because I have the questions on over here. I'm not ignoring.
Me too. That's what I'm doing too. Right.
Yeah. So I apologize if it looks like I'm always looking to the right, because Patrick Carroll is asking what we're talking about. So I just want to let you know, Patrick, we are veering towards you. Patrick says, Mark or Chris, do you have any thoughts on singers that might not have your vocal prowess that can convey emotion? And I think that's what we're really touching on a lot here.
Absolutely.
Patrick, is that.
Yeah, Tom Petty is a great example. Bob Dylan, Zach De La Rocha from Rage. Although he has a wicked mixed voice shout for sure. But there's also a Tom Waits, another guy that, I mean, one of my favorite vocalists who is, I mean, some of the stuff he records just sounds like random Cookie Monster mumbling, but it's good. Yep. I mean, it's
accurate.
There's a connection that you feel in the arranging. Another vocalist that, I mean, you could go back and forth, but Bjork has this
huge fan.
Yeah, she's a great vocalist, but for different reasons than Marc's a great vocalist, or for different reasons than Mariah Carey's a great vocalist, right? And I think it's so important for us to recognize that. I'm glad. Who was it that asked that question, Warren?
I mute myself. Pete Carroll.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Pete. It's so important for us to do these mental exercises. Like, who's really?
Sorry, my fault. Patrick Carroll. Sorry, Patrick
Carroll. Okay. Who's really an emotionally connected vocalist out there that's not that good? And there's so many of them. Jacob Dylan, Wallflowers, Adam Duritz, Counting Crows, one of my favorite vocalists ever. And you could even argue, and Mark, you might wince a little bit, but let's think about Jeff Buckley. Is he a technically great vocalist, or just one of the most spontaneously emotionally connected individuals with his voice ever? Right? I mean, you hear all these like, you know, when he's singing live, and but he's not trying to be technically good. He is just lost in experience.
Yeah.
Somebody's asking a good question. Examples of women singers. I would say Billie Holiday. Billie Holiday I did a whole episode on her. She's one of my favorite singers. I mean, I was blessed. I'll make it quick, but I was blessed on growing up in a classical and jazz household. That's all we listened to. Everybody's ever watched the video knows, every other video I mentioned this, but Queen was my gateway drug into rock and roll. Otherwise, it was all classical music and all jazz. And I was lucky because, of course, you know, Night at the Opera has all of those classical operatic elements.
Yeah.
And that meant that my father said, oh, it's okay. You know, this is worthy, is what he actually said when he gave me the album. But I think Billie Holiday is the perfect example of everything we're talking about, because she did have a pretty incredible range at the beginning of her life. She had a very, very hard life, and by the end of her career, she'd been in and out of, you know, alcohol and drug addiction. And it had affected her range, but her expressiveness in her voice, not only did it not leave, it increased, and she understood, however it worked, I don't know her process, that she could still sell the song without the massive range, you know. And so yes, she's a perfect example of an expressive singer that's not using, you know, technique.
Probably the best example we have today is Billie Eilish, honestly. I mean, she's she can sing really well. And before she kind of figured out that whispery thing she's famous for, she was doing like Christina Aguilera type stuff. I think I heard a little bit of that from her early days. And she doesn't use that ability, even though she can do it, because she knows that there's something more special in her body that is more interesting, and she's figured out how to use that to the best of its ability. So even if you can sing high, maybe that's less interesting than something else that's more natural, that's unique to you.
Than singing quiet and really, that's awesome.
Patrick did. Patrick said, "Thank you, everyone, for answering his question." Which, of course, Patrick was a very pertinent question. What we're talking about was saying, talking about. Actually, I like this little divergence here because he was asking about Chris Martin.
Oh,
and the reason why I like that because in Britain, and I know you guys are smart enough that you understand the sort of etymology of this, but in Britain, Jeff Buckley wasn't underground like he was in America. He came to Britain, actually had a top 10 single with Last Goodbye, was second to top billing headliner at Glastonbury the year that album came out. And his influence cannot be understated because when Grace came out, that launched, Chris Martin, that launched Tom York.
Yep.
Very famously, John Leckie told me the story, and it's that when they were making the bends, the band went to go and see Jeff Buckley play at Shepherd's Bush Empire, which actually is probably the show I went to see as well, which is absolutely insane, and it really helped. Because Tom was already singing with a bit of a falsetto on Pablo Honey. He was already doing that in the very famous kind of like Holly's part, where he does that in the end of Creep. But he wasn't really using it in the song as much.
Yeah.
And then and Leckie said that he went to go and see Jeff Buckley live, and it gave him the confidence to use that incredible falsetto that he already had and was able to do and put it, feature it more in the songs. And, you got Fake Plastic Trees and just like hit after hit from that record. I think there's 5 singles on that album.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. High and Dry. I mean, so I think to me, at least my experience of coming up in the UK, a lot of roads go back to Jeff Buckley. So interesting. I mean, is that an influence on you? Are you a Buckley fan, Mark? I mean, obviously everybody's a Buckley fan, but
you see Grace in the back.
He
has Grace like it's blurry, but you can see it in the back of his studio there. Yeah.
I used to.
Oh, you took it down?
Yeah, okay. I changed that wall up a little bit, but that's one of my favorite albums of all time. My brother introduced me to Jeff. I forget when. It was probably like the late '90s, early 2000s. I was late to the game again. I was late to the Queen game, late to the Jeff game. But he was a huge.
I'm 10 years older than you, so it's understandable. You were only a kid when these records came out, and you weren't even born when That's right.
Barely born.
Came out.
Barely born. Jeff Buckley is one of my favorite singers of all time, top 3 for sure. And what can you say? I mean, he was so like you said, spontaneous. It's almost like he was spontaneous even in his studio recordings. It's just like, that doesn't sound like it was something that was planned, but man, is that cool, Yeah. So, and it's funny, like you mentioned, Tom York and Chris Martin, guys who wouldn't be classically considered amazing singers, but can convey emotion like nobody else can. Absolutely. And I would say that they are amazing singers, absolutely, but not classically amazing singers.
Yeah. Someone else who just came to mind, they were asking about female singers. Amy Winehouse doesn't have a fantastic range, doesn't have a lot of technical, she ruining herself with substances and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But oh man, the amount of and we talk about this a lot in the chorus, like different types of resonance and character, which Mark, I mean, you embody that ridiculously. Like there's just this amazing range, not note range, although you have that too, but this idea that you can sing a note in so many different ways, and it sounds like a different person. And Amy Winehouse is a really good example of that. And one of the reasons that she can operate on such a low, she's got a very low voice, a low, limited range, because she has that character mindset in her singing.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite parts of the course, actually, because that's not something that I think about while I'm singing. It's something that comes
Right.
more naturally or just automatically, maybe because I've been singing for 40 plus years. So I'm not singing about every passing second that my vocal cords are producing sound.
No.
I just kind of emotionally take it in different resonances. And like you said, on one single held out note, you can embody so many different emotions just by moving your tongue around and reshaping your mouth and tension in your vocal cords. And
hey
it's
guys,
so.
Oh, huh?
Brian Taylor's asked this question a couple of times. He asked it earlier on, and I think you touched on it on physical fitness. He says, do you feel that physical core exercises are equally as important as some vocal exercises?
That's a big part of my life is working out. When you say core, do you mean like working the core of your body? Then if that's what you're asking, then specifically, yes, that's actually what I focus on the most is the muscles in the middle part of my body, abs from the shoulders down to your waist. And that's the muscles that you're going to be using the most while you're singing. And I remember one specific example when I was doing this ridiculous juice cleanse with my wife a few years ago. For some reason, we decided to do a juice cleanse. Don't recommend it. But I was on it for 6 days. And on the 6th day, I had a show with my old band. And the juice was not feeding my body what it needed to produce to help my muscles to push my voice out. And I was reaching these notes in the songs in this live performance where I was like, I physically cannot push that note out because I'm so weak right now. And so we know just how attached to your overall general health your voice is. You can't separate the two. And so it's very important for me to stay fit and make sure that that my diaphragm is strong and that I have the ability to push that out.
So one thing that we talk a little bit more about in the course is the idea that exercising and physical fitness, there's a huge mindfulness component to it. That there's the byproduct of course, being regular with exercising is that you are more fit, and so you can exert better in high intensity situations. But the other side of it is whenever you're doing strength training or mindful exercising of any kind, you are training yourself to be more in tune with the muscles in your body. And how it feels. I remember when I first started lifting weights, I remember before I was lifting weights, someone would ask me to flex my left bicep. I couldn't do it. I couldn't flex my left bicep unless I was lifting something, but I couldn't just go like this and flex it. I didn't have that mind-body connection. It was really weird. But as soon as I started getting in the habit of lifting weights, it's like my mind was unconsciously more aware of that muscle. And that is absolutely the case with your voice. And so the more parallels and sort of allegorical approach you can take to your whole body, the more you can do that, the more you're going to be able to discover how your muscles work and be aware of the muscle memory that you're programming into your body as a singer. So it's not just about the physicality of it. It's a huge mental component as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Let's see here. We've got some people that say they just purchased the course and they're really excited. One of you could talk about signal chain on the way in. We talk about multiple signal chains. That's a huge part of the mid-tier course bundle.
Yeah,
all
to
about
speak
that
to.
stuff.
Thank you. Just to speak to what a little bit of I did, because we did talk about what Marc did earlier. With using the Townsend. So I did a simple kind of course where I took the most ridiculous over the top thing, a Neumann U47, a 1953 Neumann U47, going through a 1073 BAE 1073 through a DBX 160 and an 1176, which is sort of my vocal chain of choice, and we got it sounding great. Marc sang on that same chain as well when he was here. But then I also stuck up the $300, I think it's the 440 Pure, whatever the $300 Lewitt microphone is, which of course I'm a fan of that company, going straight into the front of an Audient interface. It's about $300. So we showed that the results are achievable, and it's about the mindset. And really, you know, the thing that we loved, the thing about analog, and I don't want to go into too much of this topic because it's a little bit off the beaten path, but it's important to know. There's a lot of methodology in analog recording. I have over there, I'm not going to turn the camera around, but there is an A80, which is a 24-track, 2-inch studio machine from 1978. That is how 99% of the records that we're talking about, you know, sort of pre-2000s recorded. And there's a reality, even if you were syncing two together, it was 24 to 48 tracks. Still, most albums were done on 24 tracks. So there was an emphasis on committing as you went. So you had to have a sound that was amazing because you didn't know if that was going to be then bounced together with 15 other ones. I mean, listen to the Queen multitracks. You know, you've got like 16 vocals going on a side on each track of a stereo track on a console, on pair of tracks on a console. It's ridiculous what they had to do. If they hadn't committed the vocal sound exactly as they went, they wouldn't have been able to do that. They wouldn't have been able to commit guitar parts and all of this stuff. Now in the modern world, if you've got a good quality, clean microphone, and that's all you can afford, that is okay. Because you can record your vocal, and there's so much incredible processing now, affordable processing. Some of it even comes free with your DAW, that you can get results that are completely usable. And frankly, half of the stuff that's on the radio is actually recorded later. Marc talks about Billie Eilish. I think Billie, doesn't she use like a $300 mic? She's got some random mic that she really, really likes. And it's not.
Quite possibly.
It's not a $15,000 microphone. So
no.
I just wanted to put that in because I'm sorry, Chris, to interrupt you. Chris opened the door on that one. And I think it's important because one of the things I rail against, is the natural talent, oh, I can't be, I don't want to do this because I'm not naturally talented. That's the first thing that because I wasn't naturally talented at all. And then the second thing is like, yes, I am sitting in front of a lot of very expensive gear that I've spent, 30 years of my professional life assembling. But 99% of what I do is one microphone, one mic pre.
I think I was watching a video of you and of Joe Gilder from Home Studio Corner, of all people, and you did a couple of years ago, and you shared the story of the Beatles. Everybody went out and bought the mic that the Beatles was using, and then when the producer was asked, like, "Oh, what'd you think about the mic? Is this the best mic in the world?" He goes, "I don't know, it's just the one that was plugged in over in the corner."
Yeah, I've got one. It's the AKG D90. I have one there, but I think I got it as a gift from a very good friend of mine. But when he got it was probably like $400 or $500. I think the last time I checked, they were like over $1,000. Do we have it handy, the AKG? And the thing is, and people fight me on this, it was sort of AKG's version of what would now be considered a 57. And it's a very modest looking microphone, and it's beautiful. Yeah. Sorry, D19. I don't know why I said 90. So it's D19. And it's a great mic, but it has a characteristic of something like a 57. It's not identical, don't get me wrong, but it's a similar kind of build and quality and sound and everything.
Yeah.
And when I asked Jeff Emmerich, who of course recorded Revolver and Abbey Road, and Sgt. Pepper's, three of the, most influential albums of all time, why he used that microphone, as Chris said, he said it was because it was plugged in. The reality is like, even when they were taking a long time to make a record, it was just a couple of months. I mean, if you look at their, like Jerry Hammock, if you look at his books, he talks about their recording schedule. He's got like all of the sheets. They would come in for like 3 hours and record a song and it'd be finished.
Mm-hmm.
So, and John Lennon, asked Jack. John Lennon was very demanding, and musicians are demanding, and I'm demanding. If I'm in a zone, Marc, I'm sure you're the same way, and you want to get that idea down, you do not want to stop for an hour. Let's audition which microphone is going to sound best on this background part, Marc. And you're like, no, I want to put the part down. No, Marc, you don't understand. I don't think this microphone is the right choice. And that's the reality with Jeff Emerick. He's in a room with the Beatles, four of the most creative artists of all time. And that microphone just would get twisted around. Oh, acoustic guitar, overhead,
Yep.
electric guitar, background vocal.
Yep. You're just capturing a performance is really all you're doing.
All you're doing. Yeah. Here's a great question that sort of speaks to the performance aspect. Marc, do you try and tame and control your voice while recording so that it sounds more like the final processed sound, EQ and compression, or do you sing more loosely and process it afterward? So if I were to translate that a little bit, like, do you think about how your voice is coming out of your face so that it will sound good on the recording, or are you focused more on delivering the performance and then letting the gear do its stuff afterward, or even as you're performing?
It's definitely all of that. I mean, there's so many things that are going on while you're recording. I'm paying attention to all of that. Yes, I will allow the compressors to tame loud notes, but sometimes I want to just pull back from the microphone and belt. Yeah. And sometimes that's the best approach for whatever reason for that specific passage of the song. I'm thinking a lot about the way the voice is sounding coming out and how it's interacting with the microphone, in particular the proximity effect. Like if I'm singing quiet, obviously you want to get up closer on the microphone so that you capture all the different textures and the whisperiness of a softer vocal. And yes, I think it's yes to both of those things. It's a balance of both. You're constantly kind of like playing this game, like letting the gear do its thing and more being intentional about how the shape of your voice is coming out of your mouth. So yeah, all of that together. It's a dance.
Yeah, and I really noticed that in the course, we have these sections where we're talking about a particular line from an album that you've sung or a Queen song or whatever, and we workshop it and talk about it and try things with our voices in the control room, and a lot of it's just kind of laughing and feeling things out and like, hey, do that again, and then I'll notice something, and then you'll notice something. It's like sort of this game. But then after that little section, we go into the vocal booth, and Warren's engineering, and you and I, Marc is on piano, and I'm on mic, and we are trading this phrase back and forth based on what we just talked about and introspected and sort of workshopped. Those are a big part of the exercises that we do, and it's so fun to watch. Because I was working on editing the course, but even when I was there, like watching Marc dance with the mic. And a lot of that is the way he, some of the other stuff that we talk about, moving his face and manipulating the sound in different ways. That's part of it. But you really do. You dance with the mic. You dance with the piano. And it was really inspiring to see that, because that dance directly affects the connection that you have with the music. It's just magical. And in editing, fun to see that back, because I would watch you and then almost unconsciously copy some of your body language. And that would inform the way my voice worked. So cool.
Yeah, I have that's such a wonderful point. I have a very strong opinion on that one as well when it comes to microphones. I think that we did talk about it earlier when we were talking about microphone choice and the process that we went through choosing microphones. Only ulterior motive, of course, was to find the perfect mic for Marc to actually use for his career, so he can record at home and get the best results. The thing is everything in the chain when it comes to recording is an instrument, as far as I'm concerned. So if we're all guitar players here as well, and I'm sure many people here are guitar players. If I give you a guitar that has a neck pickup only humbucker, as opposed to a Telecaster, you are going to write completely different guitar parts.
100%.
Yes.
So if I give you a ribbon microphone, which is super dark, and I tell you, I want you to do a vocal, suddenly you're up on the mic and you're like this, and you're singing like that, and you're a little bit jazzy, and you're like working with the sound. But if I give you something that's really kind of like bright and aggressive, you're going to completely change the way you sing. And this is super, super important from the perspective of producers and engineers. When you're working with singers, it's like, we have to be very, very aware of this. It's like, that's why, as much as I love the science in what we do, I love the science perspective of it. In the real world of actually making albums and recording music, the science goes out the window, because we are, as Marc has mentioned so many times, we react to things. It's intuitive. You put on a pair of headphones, you know, it's got a good, bad mix, whatever it is, it's going to affect how you are. You put a microphone that has a very specific sound, it affects how you're going to sing, how you're going to perform. And like Chris was saying, you know, a great singer has all of those attributes and can be like, you know, up on the mic in the verse, and everything's really intimate and really super warm. And then it's backing off when it's like this, and just knows how to work it and how to get the best out of it. But it's not just, you know, they know how to get the best sound out of that microphone.
Yeah. I remember this one, the one occasion when I was young that made me aware of how important microphone control is. And, you know, being able to control how far you are from the microphone and getting the right balance of tone depending on how loud you're singing. I was in a singing competition. I must have been about 15 or 16 years old, and there was no sound check. It was just basically walk up to the microphone and play your song, and then that's your chance. You're done. So I had no idea what I was walking into sound-wise, sound reinforcement-wise, and I did my performance, and the monitor was way too loud or something like that, or not loud enough. It was like way off from what it should have been. And so I was like overcompensating or I was backing off from the mic. And this after the performance, this older gentleman comes up to me and he's like, you're a gifted singer, but man, you've really got to learn microphone control. I was like, what? That wasn't my fault. So ever since then, I'm like, make sure you've got the right balance in your ears of hearing yourself properly. It's so important. And if I don't have the right balance of things in a studio setting, if I've got cans that aren't what I like to hear, or there's not enough reverb. I'm very sensitive in the studio.
Yeah.
I'm less sensitive in a live situation because you got to deal with whatever you're dealt with. But in the studio, I like to get it sounding in my ears as close to how I feel it should sound in the end product after it's mixed and mastered. So I've got it really dialed in the studio.
Sure. Hey, we have some questions, just some course-specific questions. Do we cover vowel placement and diphthongs and have exercises for those kinds of things in the course? And the answer is yes. And one of the things that you will realize about this course right off the bat is it is the least clinical approach ever. We don't lean into terminology, definitions, or traditional exercises at all, like none. And so what we do instead is we listen to lines, we experiment with our voices, and in troubleshooting is one way, or exploring how to get certain sounds, we end up working with things like diphthongs and different vowel placements over different notes. And you know, one thing that Freddie Mercury was just so good at, and we cover this over and over again when we study Freddie Mercury lines in the course, was this the sort of approach where he might be singing a word, but the single syllable word ends up being two syllables with two different vowels, and part of that is accent, but part of that is connected to that emotional expression. And so when we take that and I get to watch Marc internalize that, then I go, oh, okay, well, this is how it should feel in my voice, and this is how it sounds, and we start connecting those dots. So the exercises, I just want to make sure that everybody goes into this course knowing that the exercises you do are going to be catchy song lines that exist that you're going to be thinking about in a completely different way. Songs are the exercises, these little tiny snippets. And it's the best way, hands down, to learn, because other exercises, normal scale approaches, normal things like that, they have this built-in defensiveness to them. Oh, better get through the exercise. Oh, better do this and go up to my highest note and my lowest note so I'm good and warmed up and so I can just... That's not the way to work. Learning things that you already love to sing and internalizing them and being one with the lyrics, being one with the approach, and exercising that. And that's what we do 40 or so times in this course.
By the way, that course is markmartelsings.com. That's where you find it. I don't know if we've mentioned that yet.
Oh, I've been pasting the link into the chat.
As have I.
Yeah, good.
So here's an interesting one. I actually don't know the answer to it, so I'm going to ask it to both of you guys. My singer is a screamer, heavy distortion voice. I've pointed him to Chris so he can learn control and texture, etc. But to no avail. Any advice on how to get him off his butt? I mean, what do you think? I mean, the only thing I do as a producer is play examples of something and go, do you like this? And if they love it, I go, okay, well, this is what they did to get to this place. I mean, any advice how to motivate a screaming singer to maybe work more on learn more control and texture is what they're asking.
Well, I work with a lot of screamers, and it's some of my funnest, most fun interactions, especially when I do it in a private lesson setting, because the number one thing that people who are trying to get into aggressive vocals need to realize is what I call the abandon principle. And Marc uses this all the time, especially live, where you get to the point to where you are not afraid of anything in terms of what may come out of your face. You know, when I talk to people who are wanting to learn to scream, I say, well, you want to learn how to scream and you want to learn how to scream really well? Can you yodel? Can you intentionally and unintentionally lean into your voice cracking like a horrible sounding teenager? Can you lean into those things that are vulnerable? If you can abandon into your vulnerability rather than go, oop, I can't do that. I don't want to sound stupid. If you can lean into your vulnerability, you will discover, and a really good thing that I talk about this on my channel all the time, but this sound, that is the gateway to a really, really awesome scream. And like so much of singing and so much of music in general, by abandoning into things and not trying to control, being vulnerable, you actually get exactly what you want. Marc?
Yeah, that's such an important thing. And I don't know about band dynamics are such a touchy thing, and I don't know how to, especially lead singers, it's hard to convince them to do anything. But, and it sounds like your lead singer has a comfort zone. He likes to scream and knows that it works for him, or at least thinks it works for him. But what Chris said is exactly right. It all comes down to not being afraid to get outside of that comfort zone and explore other discomfort zones that allow you to get out of the Chinese water torture, same thing all over and over and over and over again, because no one wants to hear a singer who's just doing the same thing over and over and over again. I don't even like listening to myself back if I'm singing at the top of my range over and over again. I love music that has variety and range of emotion. I don't know, maybe you're in a screamo band where it just requires a lot of singing. I don't know, but the best singers of all time explore a huge range of emotions, and I don't listen to any music where someone is screaming all the time, and that's what it comes down to me.
Patrick Carroll, this is really awesome. Even if you risk straining or losing some of your technique, that sounds so freeing. None of us on this chat could have said that better. Yes, do not be afraid of failure. Do not be afraid of messing up your voice. Marc, you can attest to this. You've messed up your voice and you've come back from it because of all the things we're talking about. But if you're afraid from the very beginning to mess up your voice, you're never going to try the things that are going to help you get where you want to be. And talk a little bit about your journey. You got sick and jet lagged and whatever, and you had to cancel a show, and like there was that whole.
That was a big learning. I learned a lot in that season of early 2020 when I lost my voice. You know, I'd been doing this for 20 plus years, and I had never. I'd sung through flus. I'd sung through the cold many times, but something got me in Germany in 2020 that made me completely lose my range. Had to cancel 5 shows all of a sudden at 15 minutes before doors in this 5,000 seat arena, and it was kind of the low point of my career. And it was that low point that forced my hand to finally figure out how to engineer my voice even when it's not working. Mm-hmm. So I learned a lot about how, like I mentioned before in my vocal warm-up, to take time to make subtle changes in my voice, explore different textures in my voice that I'm not necessarily going to sing later on stage, but I need to get into those nooks and crannies of my voice to free up my voice to do what I want it to do later. And not just focus on this. Like usually in the early days, my vocal warm-up was basically the Wilhelm scream. I mean, I would literally walk around backstage going, yeah. And that will work for certain communications of emotions, but not everywhere you want to go in a show. Right. So, so I learned the bubbling thing, and I took on a much more strict regimen of vocal warm-up, and it was a really painful but such a needed experience for me to go through.
Is less more? How could less be more when more is more? Yngwie Malmsteen.
That sounds like something you'd say.
A friend of mine and a fellow amazing vocalist, Spencer Sotelo, has that tattooed on his arm. How could less be more? More is more. But that was a question that just came in. Brandon asks, is less more? Like, do you take that approach to your singing?
Many times, yeah. I can't say that I always follow that rule. Sometimes more is more, as Yngwie believes, and it's a dance, man. It is really it's just don't be boring.
Yeah, right.
I think Freddie Mercury said that famously, I believe, and keep them guessing.
So one of the things that
what's his quote? It's something like, "I might be this, I might be that, but I'm never boring."
I'm never boring. Yeah, that's right.
Well, and that's a huge part of what we talked about, or what we talk about in the course, is this idea of finding, refining, and leaning into characters. We are an alternate version of ourself when we sing, and when you watch Marc perform, and certainly when you watched Freddie Mercury perform, I mean, all the faces and poses and jumping and all that bleeds into how you hold your face and the sounds you make, because you are not the calm, collected Marc Martel sitting with a cat on his lap reading a book in his living room. You are performing Marc Martel. I mean, there's a different character there, and there's lots of different characters.
Yeah, and I love those moments where less is more on stage. I love to take my audience on a journey. I love telling the band, hey, take a break for a song. It's just going to be me on the piano singing pretty softly, and it just make it a journey.
Yeah, very good. Well, let's see here. Warren, is there anybody that I've missed or that you has been asking a question that we didn't get? Let's see here.
Yes, there's one question.
Yeah.
When you were talking about touring and protecting your voice, it's been asked actually a couple of times. I've forgotten who it was, so I apologize. Was asking, is there any products that you have? Now, you were talking about the bubble,
right,
which we saw you using. Is there any, Afrin? I mean, is there any kind of products that you use?
So the straw thing that I use is called the Laxvox. I think it's made in Europe. It's basically a surgical straw, but I guess they've figured out the exact width of the straw that is most optimal. And there's legit check marks on the straw itself for like men and women, depending on the strength of your diaphragm and all that stuff. So it's called Laxvox. Other than that, there's no products that I use. I drink, maybe every now and then I'll have a chamomile tea before the show to warm up my voice with some lemon, or some herbal tea with lemon in it. And but no, there's really nothing that I can think of. I used that Entertainer's Secret spray for a while. I think it was a particularly dry show, a dry string of shows in the winter. That helps a little bit to lubricate when you're feeling particularly dry. But most of the time I'm not using anything but water.
Do you guys talk about maintaining good pitch at higher or lower ranges in the course? I agree. It is absolutely a dance. So pitch is another one of those things that, so first of all, to answer your question, yes, we do talk about pitch, but we talk about pitch like any great vocalist is going to talk about it in an indirect way. They who pursue good pitch pursue, without thinking about it, a boring voice. Do not pursue good pitch. I know that is a stupid sounding thing to say coming from a vocal coach, but the reason that I say that is because every single vocalist that I've ever worked with who is concerned about good pitch, their voice is awful, even if they have good pitch. You have to think about emotional expressiveness. And it was really interesting. I was just in session with a vocalist last week here at the studio, working with an incredible producer here. And we were doing the same line over and over and over again in the studio in the chorus. And the vocalist kept going, my pitch is off. And the producer's like, the pitch is off. Let's just take a little break. And so I actually went in the booth and we started jumping up and down and like yelping and doing all this stuff and getting in this different mood and mindset. And then I went, there, take that to the chorus. And I sat back down in the control room, and he was grittier and he was more expressive. And Barrett looked at me and goes, well, that fixed the pitch issue. And it was just this magical thing to see from this whole thing. And I'm done with my soapbox. Anybody else want to comment on pitch?
No, it's. I mean, I agree with all of that analogy. I mean, I talk a lot about one of the best techniques because I was watching some questions come up, and there was there was somebody talking about being really in the zone and understanding the lyric and the emotional content and all of that stuff, and that could be true. I also feel like one of the best tools I've learned as a producer is distraction. One of the worst things you can do when you've got, especially young, or actually age is irrelevant, but inexperienced singers coming into the studio, meaning they may have been singing their whole lives and they may be great singers, but when they come into the studio for the first time, it's a completely different experience. Put on a pair of headphones, somebody sticks a microphone in front of their face and says, perform. And that is terrifying to anybody. I hate singing. I sing on demos and I do and videos that we do, but I don't think of myself as a singer. I've been blessed to work with guys like Marc and Stephen and Isaac and all of them, James Blunt and all these incredible singers that I'm not really going to see myself as a singer. It's like, it's a means to an end. So I get stage fright or nervous or whatever. So I tend to work really, really quickly, not try to obsess about it and move out. But I put a singer in there who's not used to it or has had very little experience. The best thing I can do, which is really reiterating what Chris's example was just take them out of the zone. Sometimes the worst thing they can be doing is worrying about timing and pitch
and breath support
and all of that stuff. So I think as a producer, from the producer's perspective, working with singers, it is really super important to know all of the different ways to work.
Absolutely.
Which means, because I've been blessed to work with David Foster, and I've worked as an engineer for every single producer you can think of. On one way, I've done pre-production with the Chili Peppers with Rick Rubin for 6 months on Californication. I've had the Rick Rubin experience. I've worked with Jack Douglas, who did Aerosmith, Rocks and Toys in the Attic and Double Fantasy. I've worked with Shelley Yakus, U2. I mean, whatever. I could go on for hours. I've worked with all of these incredible producers over Mike Klink, Guns N' Roses, all the albums. you know, all of these different guys. And I'll tell you, the things that I learned was none of them did 120 takes of a vocal ever. But I've been in sessions where I was the guitar player as a kid working with producers that would just be like, do it again, do it again, do it again. That was pretty good. Do it again, do it again, pretty good, do it again. I think the best thing I learned with David Foster is he told me, now don't get me wrong, he works with incredible singers. He works with Celine Dion, Barbra Streisand. You know, he's working with these singers that are the greatest singers in the world. But he's told me it doesn't matter who it was, whether it was a demo or whether it was, you know, a massive platinum, future selling platinum record. He said he's never done more than 10 takes with any singer in his life. Yep. Because as far as he's concerned, you're not a good producer if you can't decide what to work on. And if somebody does a full take and 90% of it is fantastic, but catching a word here or a phrase here or whatever, that's up to the job of us, you know, guys like me, to know that, to identify that, to say, Mark, rather than going, Mark, that's pretty good, do it again, pretty good, do it again, do it again, do it again. And you're getting frustrated, you're losing focus, you don't understand what's going on. It's my job, yes, to be a cheerleader, yes, to distract, yes, to keep it light, yes, to keep it fun, but also to have the ability to go, you know what, that second verse is amazing, but see what you did in the first verse, this third line, you know, just how, you know, there's a drop off at the end of that phrase and it makes when you come in on the second phrase so much more powerful that you went down and then come in on the high note. Can we try that in the second verse?
Yeah.
That's production.
Yeah, so, absolutely.
Special shout. Oh, sorry. Go ahead real quick.
No, carry on. No.
Okay. I was just going to say special shout out to Blake Mclean, who's here. I didn't mention his name earlier. He was the singer that I had out last week. Fantastic artist, has a wonderful YouTube channel. Make sure you go check that out as well. But I wasn't sure. Should I bring them up anonymously or not? But he's here in the chat, so everybody say hi to Blake. But we noticed a lot of what you're talking about there last week as well, Warren. This idea, this dance between Barrett the producer and Blake the singer, and having an objective musical mind listen to your voice and go, I love that. Let's put these things together. If you ever have a chance to work with a producer, do it. Don't get stuck in thinking you always need to be doing it your way at your house, in your studio. I mean, Mark, you can talk a little bit about this because you've said in various interviews and even as we talk, you know, like sometimes there are things that you just do way better at home, but there are things that you do way better in a real studio environment. Speak to that a little bit. Yeah,
working with different producers brings out a different side of your performance. It's anything to shake up the norm is good, but I also have a happy place. You know, like I mentioned in one of my videos recently that this room right here is my favorite place to record my voice because I can take as much time to get as perfectionist as I want to and make sure that it's the performance that I really want to go out into the world. But then when I was working with Warren a couple months ago, he was like, man, that's the take. You don't need to do it again. It's got so much vibe to it. And if there's a bum note here, we can fix it. And that's the beauty with our technology today is that performance is really what you're after. You don't, especially in the studio, I mean, you can fix pitch, but you can't manufacture performance after the fact. And so a good producer knows when you've captured that good performance. And producing is so hard because I've done a little bit of producing other singers, and I've got a long way to go before I can consider myself a good producer, because just like what Warren just talked about, I've been in that situation recently where I'm like, do it again. I don't know why, but I feel like you should do it again, you know, and I don't know how to draw someone else's performance at it. So
yeah,
cheers to you,
good
Warren.
note. Thank you. Good note taking is super, super important. When you're working with singers, get the lyric sheet.
Yes.
Sit there, make notes. I mean, I've done that naturally, and it's just something that's always come to me. But when I've sat in the rooms with the David Fosters,
that was really cool, Warren, to watch you do that. When I was sitting in on the session that you guys did in Nashville, Warren, he wrote out the notes on a notepad, so it was like in his own handwriting, in like triple spaced or whatever, and then he was putting these marks above certain words and these little comments and these little cloud things, and it was just this perfect, like almost comic book scratch pad of things. And then I'm like looking at him do it, and he's feverishly writing, and I'm thinking, how can you possibly be listening and doing all of that writing? And then he showed me the paper, he lifted up and kind of put it in my face, and I looked at it again, and I was like, oh, okay, I get it. And then the session stopped, or the recording stopped, and then he went through, and he's like, this word, this phrase, and then they talked through the good and bad moments. There's no way, if he didn't have that written down and notated, almost like he was notating guitar tablature as if a guitar was playing, if he didn't do that, he wouldn't have been able to nearly as well connect with the artist. It was really a fun thing to watch.
Thank you very much, Chris. The nicest, that's a fantastic compliment. I really appreciate it. On my website, there's no reason to, it's just my personal website. I got to read you Isaac's quote. It's one of the nicest things. I said to him, can I get a quote from my website? This was like 15 years ago. And he basically spoke to that. Oh, my website's not opening, of course. Oh, there it is. He said, he's got an effortless way of drawing out the best in you, usually when you're not looking. Warren is my puzzle maker. I just bring in my old busted songs and he puts them back together again. Warren makes the most serious art impossible, light and doable. Don't know how he does it, but he does. And the reason why that's such a compliment is, like, first of all, it's Isaac Slade, and one of my favorite songwriters and singers ever. But also, he's just basically saying what we're talking about is, like, a good producer shouldn't make you feel like you just got beaten over the head with a baseball bat for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
I've been in a room as an engineer, like, in pain when I used to, like, own and run my own studio that was a commercial studio. I was like the house engineer. Sometimes I'd be producing bands, sometimes I'd be mixing, but often I was just hired. People would come in and go, oh, I love your studio, can you engineer it? And they'd pay me to be the engineer and the studio. It would be like an all-in-one price. And I watched these poor singers just get deflated. But the producer felt like that they weren't doing their job unless they were working the artist hard. And that's if you're a young producer, or not young necessarily, but if you're a new producer, you don't have to make everybody in the studio walk out every night completely deflated and exhausted because to make them think that you did your job, because your job is to know when it's great. So taking great notes is really important, because if Marc comes in and he nails a phrase, I put a ring around it. I'll put some stars. I'll maybe do a quick two or three word note as to what was so great about it. So by the end of the take, when he says, oh yeah, what did you think of that? Well, I can go, oh, see this line? Wow. Wasn't that great? That's inspiring to a singer, because first of all, you're complimenting them. You're focusing on the positive. You're not going, because I don't care if somebody gives me one line in a take, which is breathtaking. That's all I need. It's all I need for a discussion. And the worst piece of production, not to be negative, but I've been in the room with these guys, is when they just go, oh, it wasn't very good. You were really flat or out of time. How does that help?
Right.
Yep.
How did that help anybody?
It's like,
go to the bit
point out
that's
the mistakes.
good and go this line, even if it's just one line, even if it's 2 words, and go, listen to that. See how that fits in the groove?
Yep.
See how you nailed that with the phrasing? Then the singer's like, oh, wow, cool. Yeah, more of that.
So we've got several comments coming in that are, I'll summarize them. What, Marc, can you talk about your projects that you've done this last year, your upcoming tours or lack of tours? Tell us what you've been working on and what you're going to be working on. And we had a specific question about a show on the 19th of February. Is that going to happen?
The 19th of February is no, that's not happening, as far as I know. To get that out of the way, the One Vision of Queen tour in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland is not happening. It is today, the 20th, and I think the first show was right around today, or anyway. So that got canceled because of you know what, but other than that, I've been doing a lot of Christmas work. Did 3-4 songs with Warren recently on my newest Christmas EP. So it's really early to buy Christmas music right now. So go check that out if you want to get a head start. But yeah,
I've got to say it's worth checking out because first of all, it's a little left of center for Marc, if you don't mind me saying. We did it very, very organic. The whole band were recorded live in a room, some of the best players in the world. It's insane, the people that played on this. And then Marc brought in some incredible guests. And I suppose, it was interesting because on Monday night, I went over to Bob Clear Mountains and hung out with him, and my wife and I had dinner with he and his wife, and he played me some new Joe Bonamassa stuff that he'd been working on, which was phenomenal. And cool. Joe is one of the musicians that's on Marc's EP. Who are the other people that played on the EP? And
Jared James Nichols played on it. Is that you, Santa Claus? He did something so unexpected on that track. I love he's very experimental. He's mainly a blues player, but man, is he creative. Joe Bonamassa, of course, performed on Blue Christmas. We had great singer here in Nashville, Lee Nash, did a song with me. Arnel Pineda of Journey sang on Last Christmas with me, so that was a lot of fun. Wow. But yeah, that was really cool working with Warren in particular on those 4 songs, because it was, like you said, it was an organic studio, like the old days. The band would get up, and play together in the studio. We did that at Sunset Sound. Great vibey old historic legendary studio there. It was a really fun change to my normal process these days, which is just piecing things together in the studio and sending the track to the drummer and having him play on it. So in that way it got different results sonically than you probably heard if you're familiar with my music. It's a lot more organic and so a little different. But other than that, I have been, I'm mainly a touring musician. I travel with the band, various bands, one being the Ultimate Queen Celebration, or if I'm in Europe, I'm playing with One Vision of Queen or The Queen Show. Lots of bands with Queen in the name for some reason. Black Jacket Symphony here in the States. So, but you can find all my dates at my website, markmartelmusic.com.
I also want to say, too, there's an album that got lost in the shuffle for me with Marc's discography that is still now one of my favorite albums. I've been following Marc's music since the very first Down Here album, and my wife and I have made many of those songs. She still puts down, even though she, it doesn't even matter that we're working together, she still puts it on while she's making dinner or like puts the Christmas stuff on. It's so awesome. But, Down Here broke up, and then I rediscovered Marc through the Queen stuff, and then I was doing a Spotify search and went, he's got a solo album out, Impersonator, and it is so good. It's bluesier, it's harder, it's ballsier. It's really, really a cool album, and it was one of those. It was like I'd found a $100 bill in my pocket or something that I didn't know was there. It's like, oh, and we go through quite a few lines in the course from that album. So if you guys are interested in the course, you should also go out and listen to that full length album, Impersonator. There's just so many vocal textures and stuff that are going to make a lot more sense when you go through the course. I did want to talk a little bit about the course too here again. 30 some lessons of mindfulness and singing exercises and conversations and recording session interaction between Marc and I quite a bit. And then we have another section where Marc goes through his entire vocal production process and rig and signal chain. And then there's, in that same section, Warren does the same thing. Goes through from a different perspective, the producer's corner. We have the artist corner and we have the producer's corner. And then there's also an opportunity, if you really want to go deeper with the three of us, you get both the production and the singing course, and you also get a chance to be on 2 group call sessions with us, where we listen to you guys sing and submit certain short excerpts of things that you're working on. You can get feedback directly from Warren, directly from Marc, directly from me. But that's the premium, the mastery bundle. So we have three options, and these prices for this initial launch week, they start today, and then it's through next Saturday. The prices are never going to be this low again, because this was a lot of work, traveling around the country and nailing down Marc in between tours and doing all sorts of stuff. And these call sessions, simply because we don't know what schedules are going to be like in the future, the call sessions, the ability to interact directly with Marc, those will never be available again. That's only for this first launch exclusive. So check it out. I left the link again here. But anyway, back to your projects, because the course was one of the projects. We had to mention that. So.
Yeah, I mean, that basically covers it. Doing a lot of, I'm actually hoping during this unexpected time at home to do some writing, to start preparing for some more original music. It's been too long, but yeah, like, I'm glad you mentioned that, because Impersonator is the only full-length solo album I've ever done. I think I did it in 2014, and I'm still so proud of it. Oh. I got to explore some different soundscapes than I ever got to with my old band down here, and I did the whole album with producer John Fields, and it was a really cool experience because we wrote half the album in the studio, which I had never done before. I had always done the traditional thing of writing the song and then recording it, but with him, it was my first time in this experience of, he was building the track while I was writing the song with a top liner in the studio, all three of us kind of collaborating. Yeah. And then in a day and a half, we'd have a song. And that was like, at least half the album was done that way. And I just posted a link to it in the chat. But yeah, I'm still really proud of that record. That's some of the best stuff I've ever done. So yeah, there's not much else to say. I'm going to be recording some more covers coming up soon. Oh, check out my YouTube channel. I've got a couple, 2 or 3 more songs that I'm going to do soon here of just performances, like what I call them one-take performances, because I just do them all in one take without any wizardry.
Uh-huh. Those are absolutely amazing, by the way.
Yes, you're one of the few people that can do that.
Right.
I'm being asked if I miss the days of recording bands live off the floor. No, because I still do it. I mean, still most of the records like that. To me, I feel like I wonder what you guys think of just a music thing. I feel like at the moment there's sort of 2 extremes and there's not much in the middle. Meaning it's either all in the box and built in piecework, or it's like super organic and cool and hipster. Honestly, there's a massive world in the middle. Some of the greatest albums of all time are in the middle, where you get as much as you can. You get a great rhythm section, then you do overdubs, and you get that's still the best records. We talk about Soundgarden extensively. Michael Beinhorn's a very good friend of mine, who we'll be streaming with on our channel in a couple of weeks, and that's how they were done. You know, the bass and drums were off the floor with scratch guitars. Some of the rhythms were kept, and then they would overdub, and he did that. You know, he did that with Soundgarden, and as far as I'm concerned, made some of the greatest records of all time. So, yeah, you know, it doesn't have to be extremes. It doesn't have to be like
either or.
Yeah, man, we're only using one mic and the whole band's tracking in the room to tape, bro. You know, and it doesn't have to be everything is edited to within an inch of its life. There is actually music in the middle.
Yep, I've had all 3 of those different experiences. Mostly with my old band, it was that traditional record drums and bass together. Sometimes, not always, and then overdubs. But I think with you, Warren, the 4 songs we just worked on, come to think of it, was the very first time I've ever tracked with the whole band all at the same time. I'm surprised that I just realized that now. That's the first time I've ever done that, and we definitely got a different result than I would normally get.
I would say probably every Queen record, even the later stuff, was all done like that. Every single one.
That's so cool.
And I still, and like I said, I still think the records that we all hold up to being the greatest albums ever made are done like that, because there's something about that interaction that cannot be replicated.
Yeah.
And if you're taking a drum track and then editing it tight, and then putting a bass and then editing that tight, you've just got the one human being's feel, whatever that producer, engineer, editor, whatever wants to do.
Yeah.
Where, if we got the ability like we had to hire some of the finest musicians in the world, they're all mini producers. I'm the bass player, but I'm also the producer of my bass line. You know what I mean? I hear they're bringing so much wealth. I mean, quite often these days when you're working with high-level musicians, they are actually all producers. They all do have their own home studios. They are producing artists and co-writing with them and doing, like you were talking about with John Fields. I mean, that's what it is. I started off as a guitar player and got into this sort of world of making albums, and I feel like that is something that's really, it's not a necessity necessarily, because I do know engineers that aren't musicians that have turned into producers, but it is a great asset to be a great musician and be able to communicate with musicians and hear pitch and ideas and go, oh, try the minor here, do this, do that. It's all part of the process.
Mark,
anyway,
favorite Down Here album and why?
Oh, favorite Down Here album?
And why?
Ending is Beginning, because that's the one that wowed the woman that would become my wife. But it's
awesome.
it was also my favorite record already. It was kind of our peak as a band, and it's got some of my favorite songs we ever did. And it took us as a band a long time to really figure out our sound, because we had 2 lead singers, believe it or not, and both of us lead singers came at music from different directions and different backgrounds, and it took us a few albums to figure out how to blend those 2 styles, and we finally figured it out sort of on the album before that, Wide-Eyed and Mystified, but really that album, Ending is Beginning, is the one you should check out first.
So many incredible songs, and we workshop quite a few of the songs off that album in the course and make exercises and introspective studies out of lots of vocals from that album, and it has some of my favorite songs that you've written on there that are just, it's awesome. Your favorite song off of Impersonator and why? Yeah, I mean, that would be hard.
That's a tough question. I think Say the Word has a special thing for me because it was the first one I did with John Fields. We wrote it in the studio. Jen, I can't remember her last name, Jen DeSalvio came in, was a friend of John's, and we wrote the song in a day, recorded it in a day, and it just had this different energy that had ever come out of me. It was like you said, it was like a more bluesy thing that I'd ever done. I was always more into like the British melodic thing, but it never really explored blues before ever in my life, and it just naturally came out. As soon as I'm doing my solo thing, I'm like, oh man, I've got some blues in me. That's crazy.
That's so cool.
So Say the Word, it's got a cool thing to it. There's one that I wrote for my wife called Stalemate is also one of my favorites on that record.
Great. That's probably my wife's favorite one off the album. Okay, and the last favorite one, favorite Queen song to sing live. Favorite Queen song to sing, not live, in the studio.
I always like to go with Under Pressure for live because I get to share the stage with another singer, and kind of work and play off another singer like the old days with Down Here. But as far as any Queen song goes, it's hard to. I like to stipulate other than Bohemian Rhapsody,
right?
One of the greatest songs of all time, if not the greatest rock song of all time. Love of My Life is always a pleasure to perform because I get to explore different side of my voice.
Yeah. Okay. So we had a question come in here. Any words of advice for nailing down resonances when singing? Can't seem to get a handle on finding the right spot to place his voice in his face to get everything to vibrate. That is a huge, probably the main topic of conversation in the course. We talk about dynamic resonance constantly as a component of discovering amazing sounds, even grit, stamina, better range. It's all about placing resonance. Believe it or not, you will, once you figure out how to place your resonance dynamically, meaning move it around a lot like Marc does, that's one of those things that you will then accidentally unlock your better range, because you're focused on resonating and experiencing the sensations of different resonances. You're not locked into one way to resonate. That is the number one mistake that singers make right there. They are locked into, and this question is great. I'm glad you brought this up, because it's not about nailing down the right spot. There is no right spot. It's about nailing down all sorts of good feeling spots that things resonate, and then moving that around all the time for maximum expression and experience.
Amen.
And we do. I mean, that is a theme on every single video we made in that course. So thank you for asking that question. Again, course launched this morning, 2 hours ago, as we started this live event, and we will have it at the discounted prices in the 3 tiers, which include the main singing course, the production bundle, which we call the pro bundle, and the mastery bundle, which includes the basic and the pro, with 2 group call sessions with Marc, Warren, and myself. This will only be available for this next coming week. Then the prices go up, and then the call sessions, the opportunity to interact with us on a face-to-face level, disappear. Yeah, I know. And you know, why the scarcity? Why do a launch and like, the price is going to go up? Is it just about salesmanship? No. Here's the reason we do launches. The primary reason. We work hard on these things, and we get really excited about these opportunities to work with new students, to meet new singers. And if the course was just available all the time and we didn't do this launch and this fanfare, we wouldn't get a chance to reward people who jump on board with our excitement. We want to welcome a bunch of singers and producers at once and foster a community feeling of going through the material. The material is only as good as the engagement with the material. And when we can create a course and launch in this way, where we have lots of people coming together over one goal, let's study Marc's voice, let's get better.
I'm gonna throw in my little mini rant here.
Yeah, sure.
Also, you know, I'm on lots of different email lists, like we all are. I mean, I've been getting emails about courses for all kinds of fun things in music, and I'm sitting there going, most of the qualification that people doing these kinds of courses is that they have a YouTube channel.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's
so
like,
true.
I don't want to be a total a-hole by saying this, but you know, Marc is one of the greatest singers I've worked with. Sorry to make you feel uncomfortable and embarrass you, Marc, but Marc he's in that level of all the great singers I've worked with. How often are you actually going to get to sit in a room and see how that works? We flew to Nashville. We went to Blackbird Studio. We tried out tons of microphones. We worked on, and you know, I was blessed that these 2 guys are 99% of the time on camera, but I was there the whole time. And Chris would say, did I cover something? Is there anything you want to add? And I was like, yeah, why don't we talk about this? And
yeah, it's great.
This is a proper collaborative thing, filmed over a long period of time. This isn't somebody in their home studio, no disrespect, you know, buying a marketing course online and going, I'm going to learn how to make courses because I saw an ad on YouTube. This is proper stuff. And I really feel very proud of this. And as Patrick Carroll said, Marc is phenomenal. There you go.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And I've never gotten anywhere near as deep as we went into how I sing than I did with this course. So you're going to find a whole bunch of stuff that you're not going to find anywhere else that even on my YouTube channel.
It's awesome. Well, everybody, thank you so much for joining us for this morning, celebrating the course launch, but also just all the great questions and interaction. Super exciting. Can't wait to interact with more of you inside the course and on our various YouTube channels. Marc, thanks for making time for this. Warren, thanks for making time for this and for all the great conversation. I pasted the link one more time in the chat. It's also available in the description below and on Marc's and Warren's various social outlets as well. We'll see you all later.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks very much. You all rock.